I dedicate my member statement to Jana Williams and to her family, and I ask for leave for a moment of silence.
Tonight, remembering Jana Williams, vigils for a young mother who was murdered in Winnipeg, and calls for justice.
Right now I'm sitting with a 9-year-old in grade 4 who is reading, writing, and doing math at a grade 2 level.
And some parents of students with special needs in the Yukon are worried their kids won't get the help they need. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. First Nations advocates in Manitoba are pressing the provincial government to do more when it comes to implementing the MMIWG National Inquiry's 231 calls for justice. This follows the tragic death of Jana Williams, whose remains were found in Winnipeg last week. Brittany Hobson explains.
Jana Williams was honored during a Facebook Live event today. The event was hosted by Manitoba Kiwitinawi Ogimaganak. Topics included pandemic updates, but Williams' homicide was top of mind for Hilda Anderson-Pierce. She is the program manager for the MMIWG Liaison Unit for MKO. She says Manitoba needs to move on implementing the National Inquiry's 231 calls for justice. Otherwise, Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit will continue to be put at risk.
Jana was sacred. She was Indigenous. She was a mom, and she was a daughter, sister, granddaughter, mother, and we have to remember that and, to honor her and to really amplify the work that needs to be done to address gender-based violence so we end the genocide against Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ in Canada.
Williams' remains were found on March 4th. The 28-year-old was a mother of 2 and pregnant with her 3rd child. This week, police put out a public plea asking for information surrounding her homicide. They believe Williams was transient at the time of her death. Anderson-Pierce says there needs to be more barrier-free housing and supports for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit.
Racism is killing Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and it must be addressed, and those barriers need to be removed, and we also need adequate resourcing and supports.
Right now, she says criteria to access resources is not receptive to each individual's needs. Anderson-Pierce says she's seen little movement from the province since the inquiry released its final report in 2019.
I dedicate my member statement to Jana Williams and to her family, and I ask for leave for a moment of silence.
NDP MLA Nahani Fontaine also called out the provincial government during Monday's Legislative Assembly.
Miss Williams' remains were thrown away like garbage, like Tina Fontaine and Felicia Solomon Osborne before her. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit continue to be under attack in this province. So the question on this day is, where is the MMIWG 2S National Inquiry's call for justice? Where's the public inquiry into the shooting death of Aisha Hudson? And where is the care, justice, and protections for Indigenous women and girls?
The province did not respond to APTN's request for a response. Meanwhile, in Williams' home community of Hollowater First Nation, residents are showing their support by hanging red dresses. Members are planning a vigil in Hollowater for a later date. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
With Quebec still refusing to adopt Joyce's principle, a First Nations authored plan to reform healthcare, the Atikamekw of Manawan kicked their pressure tactics up a notch this week. They filed a series of human rights complaints with the United Nations. But can it help? Our Lindsay Richardson takes a look.
The Atikamekw Nation presented Quebec with Joyce's principle in November 2020. Quebec supported the content, but refused to make it policy because it calls out the problem of systemic racism. After months of back and forth, Canada kicked in $2 million for the Atikamekw Nation to continue advocating for Joyce's principle. And this week, they took their efforts to the international stage of the United Nations.
Justice pour Joyce! Justice pour Joyce!
On veut faire pression auprès des gouvernements, tant au niveau du Canada, tant au niveau du Québec, pour reconnaître la présence du racisme systémique.
Sibby Flamand, deputy chief of Manawan, says the final moments live streamed from Joyce Echaquan's bed at Joliet Hospital show both medical racism and racism against Indigenous women. With the help of an assistant law professor, Manawan dispatched several letters on International Women's Day, one addressed to every UN official they felt could help.
On va s'adresser au rapporteur spécial sur la violence faite aux femmes, le rapporteur spécial sur les droits des peuples autochtones, le rapporteur spécial qui veille au respect du droit de la santé, le rapporteur spécial aux questions relatives aux minorités et le rapporteur spécial qui lutte contre le racisme et la discrimination raciale.
And particularly the leaders of Indigenous governments.
While the UN can't technically force a reaction from Quebec or from Canada, Levesque says escalating the case in this way forces a change in conversation.
Quand on utilise des mécanismes de droit de la personne, ce que ça fait, c'est que ça change le débat et que c'est pas une question de politique ou de priorité, c'est une question de droit et d'obligation juridique.
Despite the systemic racism stalemate, Quebec did secure millions of dollars to train cultural navigators for hospitals following Joyce's death. They haven't yet responded to Manawan's filing at the UN. But as for the federal government...
When I look at this, I say, good. This is their right. They are choosing to exercise it.
Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller says Joyce's principle and racism in healthcare are both on the federal government's radar, even if Quebec doesn't budge.
I think that as a country, we need to recognize that this is where we are as a country. I think you would perhaps, I think it's a sign of maturity for Canada to recognize that we're not perfect, that we've got a heck of a lot of work to do.
Flamand says it's another move to keep both the principle and Joyce's memory alive.
Pour cette raison qu'on veut amener plus loin l'histoire de Joyce Echaquan. Elle a crié dans les réseaux sociaux, puis on veut que sa voix résonne au niveau international.
Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
To the global pandemic now. Currently, there are 23 active cases of COVID-19 in the Nunavut community of Arviette. That is one community of 2,600 with almost as many cases as each of the maritime provinces. Now, the government of Nunavut Health Department has decided to start lifting some quarantine restrictions on the community, which has been on lockdown for more than 100 days. Nunavut's premier is also one of the two MLAs who represent Arviette. We asked him how he thought this news would be received back in his hometown.
I think people of Arviette are quite tired of the lockdown. I know I would be, and I think you would be too. It's getting on to 120 days. So, like I said, the Hamlet and the Health Department and Chief Public Health Officers all have regular telephone conversations, and they work with each other.
This week will mark 1 year since the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 virus a global pandemic, prompting worldwide lockdowns. Over 2.5 million people around the world have died due to COVID-19, including more than 22,000 Canadians. As a result, Prime Minister Trudeau announced the federal government is naming March 11th, 2020 as a national day of observance to remember everyone lost to the virus and the great impact it has had on all lives.
They have been taken from us, but they will not be forgotten. Each one was special. Each one was loved. They were grandparents, friends, parents, brothers, sisters, and colleagues. There are no words for the pain of losing someone you love. As a country, we remember all those we lost and we mourn with families and friends.
And with more and more people being vaccinated every day, the federal government occasionally features vaccine champions. Today at the federal COVID update, the Prime Minister did just that, showcasing a Mohawk elder.
Our top priority is to get you your shot as soon as possible. No one will be left behind. Just take Myrtle from Kanawake Quebec. She's 90 years old and was the first elderly person living at home in Kanawake to receive a vaccine. For Myrtle and her family, getting her shot was a big moment, because now she'll be able to tell her sons who call every Sunday that she is safer.
Good to hear Myrtle's story. Well, time to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, a look at the price you pay for standing up for your rights. Welcome back. Indigenous people fighting for their rights are often criminalized, labeled terrorists, sometimes thrown in jail. Tawahumbiga spent a month in jail for ignoring an injunction by conducting ceremony at the gates of the Trans Mountain Pipeline terminus in Burnaby, BC. He tells his story to APTN Investigates reporter Rob Smith.
Tanse Tawaham Nitsika San Seze Tawaham Sui. My name's Tawahumbiga, and I'm from Lutso Kaidene First Nation. I'm a poet, musician, land protector.
In Vancouver, it's yet another pipeline, another fight to halt the expansion of Kinder Morgan, bringing oil from the tar sands to the coast.
Like, of course, I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the next 7 generations, but I'm even thinking about the more immediate future, which is sort of as the injunction went on, they continued ramping up the consequences for folks who are in violation of the injunction.
Summer of 2018, he attends a rally. Close to 50 people are there. He knew he was going to be arrested. In fact, he wanted to be arrested.
And once it got to a point where they were like mandating minimum jail time, 14 days if you pled guilty, or no, 21 days if you pled guilty and 28 if you fought it, that's where it really lit up kind of my own resistance, which is I don't think anybody should be going to jail for direct action or land protection work. And then I was arrested just right there in that crosswalk. I walked up, and one of my Nish uncles like handed me a smudge pot, and I just went around with this little abalone shell smudging people, making sure that everybody's doing this work in a good way, and staying in prayer myself.
He hoped the Prime Minister would hear his call to protect the coast.
And all these people in the back, they don't want this either. Like, a lot of them would just show up to our support rallies who just live right here. They don't want it.
Getting arrested was the easy part. His journey into the justice system was something else.
Oh, it was so many court days. From our first appearance all the way through until sentencing, it was a 2-year process. And my spirit just told me I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to plead guilty for on my account. They're saying that we were criminally disrespecting Canada's legal system and a court order, but the way that I feel I'm treated as an Indigenous person, and I feel like Indigenous law is treated when I step into that room, is like we're being mightily disrespected. Our systems of law, our legal systems, our governance structures, there's contempt for those very things in that court system.
He recalls it was a traumatic experience.
I would say that it has caused a barrier for me right now, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I think it's like something mental, emotional, spiritual. I feel more fear than I used to, and I hate to admit that, but like I know it's important to, because this work isn't fearless work.
He was willing to spend a month in jail because he truly believes things can change.
When you look at any given moment where we are being run over, it looks like that's all there is, and that's all there's going to be. But the truth is, that's a narrative that's being presented to us, especially by the Canadian media, to make it look like it's inevitable. But the truth is, I don't think that's inevitable. The truth is, I think after learning a lot about these corporations, they're spending as much money as they're making. They don't have infinite money. the dependence on petroleum products is contrived. We could be using other materials, but the government provides subsidies for corporations to like continue pumping out novelty items that we don't need. I just know we could be doing things in a better way, that's all. And the land would be appreciative of that.
And for more on this story, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. The Juno nominations were announced today. Details coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This beautiful sunrise was sent in by our viewer, Lynn St. Denis. This was the view from Hunters Point, Quebec, located south of Val d'Or. And we want to thank all of our viewers for their submissions. Your photos can be sent to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, +6 with showers in Halifax, partly sunny and 6 above in Fredericton, -19 in Inukjuak, -1 with snow for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, +9 in Montreal and Saguenay, 6 above in Chibougamau, 15 with showers in Toronto, 6 with rain in Sault Ste. Marie, -3 with snow for Sioux Lookout, +6 in Thunder Bay. -15 with snow for Churchill, -2 in Norway House and God's Lake, +2 with showers for Winnipeg, sunny, and 3 in Dauphin, +2 for Regina, -2 in Saskatoon, -7 with rain in Meadow Lake, 19 below for Uranium City. Over in northern Alberta, -9 with snow in Fort McMurray, 6 below in Peace River. +6 in Medicine Hat under sunny skies, -3 with snow for Edmonton, 10 above in Vancouver and Victoria where showers are expected, +2 for Smithers, sunny, and -2 in Prince George, -12 with snow for Old Crow, -2 in Whitehorse, -22 for Yellowknife, snow, and -16 in Norman Wells. Flurries and -21 in Sax Harbor, -9 with snow for Inuvik, -24 in Baker Lake and Whale Cove, 30 below in Cambridge Bay, -28 in Resolute and Joe Haven with snow. Well, it's one of the biggest days in Canadian music when the Juno nominees are announced. And this year, some of Canada's top Indigenous talent is being showcased at the Virtual Awards on May 16, 2021 in Toronto, Ontario. This year, the nominations for the Indigenous Artist or Group of the Year include Burnstick, Crystal Shawanda, Julian Taylor, Lily Gilday, and Terry Oirak. The co-chair of the screening committee says many Indigenous artists are also nominated in mainstream categories.
Lila Gilday and Julian Taylor were nominated in Contemporary Roots Album of the Year. Lido Pimentia was nominated for Album Artwork. Crown Lands for Breakthrough Group and Rock Album of the Year. And Crystal Shawanda was nominated for Blues Album of the Year. I just feel like it's right on the edge of just, you know, kind of exploding. And I see that on many different levels. And I think that that's so wonderful and exciting that people... you know, more people are going to get to hear the beautiful sounds and stories of our people.
Congrats to all the nominees. The Yukon Board of Education recently changed the way children with learning needs can access supports like assistive technology and speech therapy. Now only students with exceptional special education requirements are guaranteed those supports. But First Nation parents and education groups say that move hurts students. APTN's Sarah Connors explains.
Amy Janiers Ta'an. Her son Spencer is a 4th grader who requires extra support in school.
He requires speech therapy, physio, occupational therapy.
Spencer is not considered what is commonly known as special education, but he does need extra help. Since kindergarten, Janier has been trying to get her son on an individualized education plan, or IEP. IEPs guarantee students who have extra learning needs but don't fall under special education will receive the supports they require, like educational assistance, occupational therapy, or supplementary aids. But Janier says her repeated requests for an IEP have been denied with little explanation.
Right now I'm sitting with a 9-year-old in grade 4 who is reading, writing, and doing math at a grade 2 level. And that seems to be okay.
But with the system-wide overhaul of inclusive education, it's unlikely Spencer will ever be placed on an IEP. In 2020, the Board of Education redefined the definition of an IEP. Now, only students with profound special education needs, like requiring help with eating and using the bathroom, are eligible. The change caused 138 students, many of whom are First Nation, to be switched from IEPs to student learning or behavioral plans that aren't protected by the Education Act. That means it's up to individual schools and teachers to keep students on track, not the Department of Education.
It was really disheartening to hear that they were cutting back on IEPs, especially since we've been fighting so hard to get my son on one.
We certainly recognize that we need to improve our inclusive and special education programming.
Ryan Sickas is the Assistant Deputy Minister of Schools and Student Services. He says students already on IEPs before the 2019 switch can stay on them, and that the change was made to ensure students are on the plan that best suits their needs.
And these are the situations where we feel a student learning plan or a behavioral support plan is the most appropriate way to document those additional supports that are necessary for those kids so that they can fully meet the outcomes of the curriculum.
Educational advocates like the Yukon First Nations Education Directorate have written to the Premier calling for a reversal of the IEP restructure. They've also asked for a meeting with Yukon Education. Meanwhile, Amy Janier's son has recently been placed on a student learning plan, but she says it's too soon to tell if it will provide him with the support he needs for his future.
With the amount of accommodations and recommendations that he's required to have to be successful, it really needs to be an IEP. This kid needs the support to be successful in his life.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
A new episode of Face to Face is just minutes away. Our guest tonight is former NDP Member of Parliament, Romeo Saganash. Saganash stepped away from politics in 2019, but now says he is encouraged by the number of Indigenous people running for office.
We definitely have a place in the House of Commons. We definitely have a role to play. Although it seems impossible at times, but we do manage to bring about change in that colonial place, and I think it's important that we have more and more people participating in that process.
And you can watch the entire interview with Romeo Saganash in just about 1 minute's time. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. Join us live tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when host Melissa Ridgen will put medical racism in focus. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.